The galaxy had forgotten about Earth. 40,000 years was a long time, even for species that lived for centuries. The planet that had once sent radio signals into the void, that had launched primitive rockets toward its moon, had gone silent. And silence, in the vast emptiness of space, usually meant death. Commander Zethel stood on the bridge of his ship, the eternal vigil, staring at the star charts that showed the quarantine zone. Earth's solar system sat at the center of a red circle, marked with warnings in 12 different languages. Do not enter. Hazardous region. Dead civilization. He was a Torvian, a species known for their patience and their long memories. His gray skin was marked with the ritual scars of his rank, and his 4 eyes moved independently as he studied the data on multiple screens. This assignment was supposed to be simple. Patrol the border of the dead zone. Make sure nothing came out. Report anything unusual. Nothing ever came out. Nothing had come out for 40,000 years. Commander, said a voice behind him, I have completed my analysis of the historical archives. He turned to face Lieutenant Kira Voss, the ship's historian. She was a Netheri, smaller than most of the crew, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that seemed to absorb light. She had spent her entire career studying dead civilizations, and humanity had always been her favorite subject. And what did you find? Zethel asked. Kira pulled up a holographic display. Images of Earth appeared, captured by long-range sensors 40,000 years ago. Blue oceans, green continents, swirling white clouds. It had been a beautiful world, by all accounts. The humans were fascinating, she said. They were so young when they disappeared. Only a few thousand years of recorded history. They had barely begun to explore their own solar system. But they were already showing signs of becoming something remarkable. Remarkable how? They were adaptable. More than any species we have ever encountered. They lived in frozen wastelands and burning deserts. They survived diseases that should have killed them. They rebuilt after wars that destroyed their cities. No matter what happened to them, they kept going. Zethel made a sound that might have been a laugh. And yet they still destroyed themselves. That is what the records say, Kira agreed. Their final transmission spoke of something called Project Lazarus, some kind of emergency protocol. Then everything went silent. The commander was about to respond when an alarm sounded. Red lights flashed across the bridge. Crew members rushed to their stations, checking sensors and running diagnostics. What is happening? Zeth-Al demanded. The communications officer, a young Velthari named Tolmesh, looked up from his console with an expression of pure shock. Commander, we are receiving a transmission from inside the quarantine zone. That is impossible. There is nothing alive in there. I know, sir. But the signal is clear. It is using an ancient encoding format. Human encoding. The bridge fell silent. Every crew member stopped what they were doing and turned to look at the communication station. Zethal felt something cold crawl down his spine. He had served in the collective fleet for over 200 years. He had seen things that would drive lesser beings mad. But this was different. Play it, he ordered. Static filled the bridge speakers. Then, slowly, a pattern emerged. Beeps and tones arranged in a sequence that repeated over and over. Kira stepped forward, her eyes wide, her hands trembling as she worked to translate. It is a simple message, she said. Just a few words, repeated on a loop. What does it say? Kira looked at her commander, and in her eyes, he saw something he had never seen before. Fear. It says, "We remember. We are coming home." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Zethel gripped the railing in front of him, his 4 eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the viewport. Somewhere out there, in the dead zone that should have been empty, something was broadcasting. Something that claimed to be human. Trace the signal, he ordered. I want to know exactly where it is coming from. Tolmash worked frantically at his console. The source is deep inside the quarantine zone, near a stellar nursery in Sector 7. But Commander, that region is lethal. The radiation levels alone would destroy any ship that entered. Could the signal be old? A ghost transmission bouncing off debris? No, sir. The signal is active. It is responding to our presence. When we moved closer, the broadcast strength increased. Kira was already pulling up more data, her fingers flying across her console. Commander, I am detecting anomalies in the stellar nursery. The stars there, they are not forming naturally. They are arranged in a pattern. What kind of pattern? She magnified the image on the main screen. The bridge crew stared at what appeared to be a cluster of young stars, burning bright against the darkness. But as Kira highlighted certain points, a shape became clear. A spiral. A double helix. It is the structure of human genetic code, she whispered. Someone is building stars in the shape of human DNA. Zethel felt the deck sway beneath his feet, though he knew the ship was perfectly stable. Everything he thought he knew about the universe was crumbling. The humans were dead. Everyone knew the humans were dead. The collective had watched them die. They had recorded their final screams and filed them, away in archives that no one ever visited. But dead species did not build stars. Dead species did not send messages across 40,000 years of silence. Contact Collective Command, he ordered, his voice steady despite the fear rising in his chest. Tell them we have a situation. Tell them the quarantine zone is no longer empty. He turned back to the viewport, staring at the distant glow of the stellar nursery. Somewhere in that light, something was waiting. Something that remembered. And tell them, he added quietly, that the humans are coming home. The message went out at faster than light speeds, racing toward the capital worlds of the collective. Within hours, it would reach the Supreme Council. Within days, it would spread to every corner of civilized space. And everywhere it went, it would carry the same terrible truth. Humanity had not died. Humanity had been waiting. And after 40,000 years of silence, they had finally decided to speak. The galaxy would never be the same. The news spread faster than any virus. Within a week, every species in the collective knew about the signal from the dead zone. Emergency councils gathered on a dozen worlds. Fleets were placed on high alert. And in the great archives of the Velthari homeworld, scholars worked through the night to unseal records that had been locked away for 40,000 years. Archivist Tolmith had not slept in 3 days. His species did not need much rest, but even Velthari had their limits. He sat in the central reading chamber, surrounded by floating holographic displays that showed everything the collective had ever recorded about humanity. The images were disturbing. Humans at war, killing each other with weapons that grew more terrible with each generation. Humans building machines that poisoned their own air and water. Humans splitting atoms and burning cities to ash. They had been a violent species, primitive and dangerous. But there are other images too. Humans creating art of stunning beauty. Humans risking their lives to save strangers. Humans standing together against disasters, helping each other survive floods and earthquakes and diseases. They had been capable of great kindness as well as great cruelty. You look troubled, said a voice from the doorway. Tolmeth looked up to see Admiral Zyrathan of the Collective Defense. Fleet. She was a Kravani, tall and lean, with scales that shifted color based on her mood. Right now they were a deep, worried blue. I have been reviewing the final transmissions from Earth, Tolmeth said. Before they went silent. And what did they tell you? The archivist pulled up an audio recording. Static filled the chamber, and then a human voice emerged, speaking in a language that the translation software converted to collective standard. This is Director Samuel Hayes of Project Lazarus. If anyone is receiving this, please help us. We are dying. Our planet is dying. But we have a plan. We can save ourselves if we have time. Please, we are begging you. Send help. Send anything. We just need time. The recording dissolved into static. Xarathan stood in silence, her scale shifting to a pale gray. We received that message, she said quietly. 40,000 years ago. We received it and did nothing. The council at the time decided that intervention was too risky, Tolmeth explained. They believed that whatever was killing the humans might spread to other worlds. The quarantine was meant to contain the threat. And now the threat has returned. Tolmeth nodded slowly. There is more. In the final transmissions, the humans mentioned technologies that we considered impossible. Genetic reconstruction that could rebuild a body from a single cell. Consciousness uploading that could preserve a mind after death. Stellar engineering that could reshape stars themselves. Xarathan leaned forward. Stellar engineering? Like what our scouts detected in the nursery. Exactly like that. We dismiss these claims as the fantasies of a desperate species. We assumed they were exaggerating, trying to make themselves seem valuable enough to save. But what if they were telling the truth? The Admiral began to pace, her claws clicking against the stone floor. If the humans really developed those technologies, and if they used them to survive, then what are they now? What have 40,000 years of evolution turned them into? That is what frightens me, Tolmeth admitted. We have seen species evolve over millions of years. The changes are usually small and slow, but humans were already changing faster than any species we had ever encountered. Their technology doubled in power every few decades. If they continued that rate of growth for 40,000 years, he did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. On the capital world of Nexus Prime, the Supreme Council met in emergency session. Representatives from all 12 member species filled the great chamber, their voices rising in argument and fear. Some demanded an immediate military strike against the Stellar Nursery. Others called for diplomatic contact. A few suggested fleeing to the far edges of the galaxy and hoping the humans would not follow. Chancellor Vexorn called for silence. She was ancient, even by collective standards, her body supported by mechanical implants that kept her failing organs functioning. She had led the Council through 3 major wars and countless smaller conflicts. But she had never faced anything like this. We have received new information from the survey vessel, she announced. Lieutenant Kira Voss has completed her analysis of the Stellar Nursery. What she has found is deeply troubling. A holographic image appeared above the council chamber, showing the cluster of artificial stars. But now there were new details visible. Structures orbiting each star. Energy patterns flowing between them. And at the center of the cluster, something massive. Something that made even the largest collective stations look like children's toys. The humans have been building, Vexorn continued. For 40,000 years, they have been constructing something in that nursery. Our sensors cannot determine its full size or purpose. But the energy readings suggest it is more powerful than anything we have ever created. A Torvian representative rose to speak. Then we must destroy it, before they finish whatever they are building, and risk provoking a species that can construct stars. Another voice shouted. That would be suicide. The chamber erupted into chaos. Species that had been allies for millennia turned on each other, old grievances rising to the surface. Fear did that to people. It brought out the worst in them. Vexorn watched the chaos with tired eyes. She had seen this before. She knew how it would end, with blood and fire and the destruction of everything the collective had built, unless she found another way. Enough, she said, her voice cutting through the noise. We will not destroy ourselves with fear. The humans have sent a message. They said they are coming home. That suggests they want to talk. So we will listen. We will send our fleet to meet them. And we will discover what 40,000 years of silence has created. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every representative. And we will pray that they still remember mercy. The fleet began assembling the next day. 3,000 warships from every species. The largest military force in collective history. They would travel to the stellar nursery and face whatever waited there. No one knew if they would return. The journey to the stellar nursery took 6 months. 6 months of traveling through empty space, moving closer to a region that every instinct screamed to avoid. The fleet stretched across millions of kilometers, 3,000 warships bristling with weapons that could crack planets. It was enough firepower to destroy any known civilization. Admiral Xyrathan stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Sovereign Will, watching the stars slide past. Kira Voss stood beside her, clutching a datapad filled with everything the collective knew about humanity. It was not enough. It would never be enough. Tell me about them, Xyrathan said. The humans. What were they really like? Kira thought for a moment before answering. They were contradictions. They could be incredibly cruel, starting wars over small pieces of land or minor differences in belief. They killed millions of their own kind for reasons that seem insane. But they could also be incredibly kind. They would risk their lives for strangers. They would give everything they had to help someone in need. Which side was stronger? I do not know. That is what made them so dangerous. You could never predict which side would win. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the stellar nursery. What they saw took their breath away. The artificial stars burned bright against the darkness, arranged in that impossible double helix pattern. But now they could see more. Ring worlds circling each star. Space stations the size of small moons. And ships. Thousands upon thousands of ships, moving between the structures like blood cells through veins. By the ancestors, Xyrathan whispered. They built all of this. In 40,000 years, they built all of this. The collective fleet spread into a defensive formation. Weapons powered up. Shields activated. Every captain waited for the order to fire. But Xyrathan held back. Something told her that shooting first would be a terrible mistake. Admiral, the communications officer, called out. We are being scanned. Multiple frequencies. They are examining every ship in the fleet. Let them look. We have nothing to hide. Minutes passed. The tension on every bridge in the fleet grew thick enough to cut. Then, finally, movement. Ships began emerging from behind the artificial suns. Silver vessels that seemed to flow through space rather than fly through it. They were beautiful in a way that machinery should not be beautiful. And they were enormous. The smallest of them dwarfed the largest collective dreadnought. They did not attack. They simply moved into position, surrounding the collective fleet without firing a single shot. A message could not have been clearer. We could destroy you any time we want. We are choosing not to. A transmission came through on all frequencies. Every screen in every ship in the fleet lit up with the same image. A human face. A woman with silver hair that seemed to float around her head as if gravity did not apply. Her eyes were strange, shifting colors that did not exist in nature. But her smile was warm, almost gentle. Welcome, she said. We've been waiting for you. My name is Elena Marsh. I speak for the children of Lazarus. Xyrathan found her voice. Children of Lazarus? Is that what you call yourselves now? It is what we have become. We were dead, you see, or close enough to dead that it made no difference. Our planet was dying. Our species was dying. We sent out cries for help, and the galaxy answered with silence. So we saved ourselves. We built this place in the heart of the stellar nursery, where no one would think to look. And we waited. Waited for what? Elena's smile faded slightly. Waited until we were ready. Waited until we were strong enough that no one would ever be able to ignore us again. It took 40,000 years. But we are patient. We learned patience from our suffering. Kira stepped forward, her voice trembling. What happened to Earth? To your homeworld? Earth is dead. We could not save it. We could only save ourselves, those who made it to the evacuation ships before the end. 17 million people out of a population of 12 billion. We watched our world burn from orbit. We listened to the screams of those we could not take with us. Elena paused, and for just a moment, something ancient and terrible flickered in those strange eyes. We remember each single one of them. We will never forget. Admiral Xyrathan spoke carefully. The quarantine, the silence of the collective, it was a mistake. A terrible mistake made by leaders who were afraid of what they did not understand. Yes, it was. If we could go back, if we could change what happened. But you cannot go back. That is the nature of time. You can only go forward. And now you must decide what kind of future you want. Elena spread her arms, gesturing at the vast civilization behind her. This is what we built from the ashes of our world. Cities in space. Artificial suns. Technologies that you cannot even imagine. We spent 40,000 years creating a new humanity. One that would never be helpless again. She lowered her arms and looked directly into the camera. Directly into the eyes of every being watching. We are not here to destroy you. We are not here for revenge. We are beyond such things. But we are here to make something very clear. Her voice hardened, losing its warmth. We will never ask for help again. We will never beg for mercy. We will never be weak or vulnerable or dependent on the kindness of species who have none to give. We are humanity reborn, and the galaxy will learn to respect us one way or another. The transmission ended. The silver ships hung in space, silent and waiting. 3,000 collective warships faced them, armed with enough weapons to destroy worlds. But every captain in the fleet knew the truth. They were hopelessly outmatched. Whatever the humans had become, whatever they had built in their 40,000 years of exile, it was beyond anything the collective could fight. Xyrathan made her decision. Stand down all weapons, she ordered. Open a channel to their flagship. Tell them we want to talk. It was not surrender. Not exactly. But it was the beginning of something new. Something that would change the galaxy forever. The humans had returned. And this time, they were not going to be ignored. The negotiations took place on a space station that the humans had built specifically for this purpose. It appeared in empty space 3 days after the initial contact, assembled by machines that moved faster than the eye could follow. The structure was beautiful and alien, with curved walls that seemed to breathe and lights that responded to movement. The collective delegates felt like children visiting the home of giants. Admiral Xyrathan led the diplomatic team. Kiravas accompanied her as an advisor, along with representatives from each of the 12 member species. They were met at the docking bay by humans who looked almost normal until you looked closely. Their skin was too smooth, their movements too fluid, their eyes too bright. They had changed in ways that went far beyond simple evolution. Elena Marsh greeted them personally. She wore a simple silver robe that seemed to be made of liquid metal. Up close, she was even more unsettling. Her face was ageless, neither young nor old. Her presence filled the room like a physical force. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I know this must be difficult for you. Facing the ghosts of a species you thought you had buried." "We did not bury you," Xyrathan replied carefully. We thought you had buried yourselves. Perhaps. But you did not mourn us, did you? You did not remember us or honor our memory. You simply locked the door and walked away. Elena gestured for them to follow her. Come, let me show you what grew in the darkness you left us in. She led them through corridors that defied normal geometry, past windows that looked out on impossible vistas. They saw worlds being built in real time, raw matter being shaped into cities by invisible hands. They saw children playing in parks that floated among the stars. They saw old men and women who moved with the grace of athletes, their bodies rebuilt and renewed. We conquered death, Elena explained. The first generation of survivors was determined that no one would ever be lost again. They developed technologies that could repair any injury, reverse any disease, restore any mind. We do not die unless we choose to. That is impossible, one of the delegates muttered. So is building stars. So is surviving 40,000 years in the heart of a stellar nursery. Impossible is just another word for things you have not learned to do yet. They entered a vast chamber filled with holographic displays. Maps of the galaxy hung in the air, marked with lines and symbols that the collective delegates did not recognize. Elena walked to the center of the room and raised her hand. The display shifted, focusing on a single barren star system. Watch, she said. The collective fleet had positioned observation drones throughout the system. Now those drones transmitted live images back to the station. Human ships surrounded the third planet, a dead rock with no atmosphere and no resources worth mentioning. Machines descended to the surface. Machines unlike anything the collective had ever seen. In 6 hours, they took the planet apart. Not destroyed it. Took it apart. Layer by layer, the rock was broken down into its component elements. Those elements were sorted, refined, and reassembled. Where there had been a dead world, there was now a ring. A massive habitat circling the star with room for trillions of lives. The delegates watched in stunned silence. What they had witnessed was not just technology. It was power on a scale that made the collective look primitive. We can do this with any planet, Elena said. Any asteroid. Any moon. We can build habitats in places you consider uninhabitable. We can create resources from nothing. We have no limits except those we choose to impose on ourselves. Xyrathan found her voice. Why are you showing us this? To frighten us? Yes. Elena turned to face her, and there was no warmth in her eyes now. I want you to be frightened. I want you to understand exactly what you are dealing with. Because fear, in the right amount, leads to respect. And respect leads to peace. She walked among the delegates, studying each of them in turn. We do not want war. War is wasteful and stupid, a distraction from building and creating and growing. But we will not accept being treated as less than you. We will not accept being quarantined or ignored or dismissed. We are humanity, and we have paid for our place in this galaxy with 40,000 years of suffering. What do you want from us? Kira asked quietly. Elena stopped in front of her. Recognition. A place at the table. The right to travel freely, to trade freely, to exist freely. Everything that every other species in the collective takes for granted. And if we refuse? The question came from a Kovani delegate, a military officer who had spent his entire career preparing for threats like this. His scales were dark red with aggression, and his hand rested on the weapon at his hip. Elena smiled at him, and that smile was terrifying. We will not force you. That is not our way. But we will continue to grow. We will continue to build. We will spread through this galaxy whether you accept us or not. And eventually, you will realize that working with us is far better than competing against us. She tilted her head slightly. We can be very good friends. The best friends you have ever had. But we can also be very bad enemies. It is entirely up to you. The negotiations continued for days. The collective delegates argued among themselves, debated with the humans, sent messages back to their governments asking for guidance. The answers that came back were mixed. Some species wanted to accept the humans immediately. Others wanted to fight. Most were simply paralyzed by fear. In the end, they agreed to a trial period. The humans would be allowed to send ambassadors to the collective worlds. Trade would be open between the two civilizations. Military cooperation would be discussed. It was not full acceptance, but it was a start. Elena Marsh stood at the airlock as the collective delegation prepared to leave. "This is the beginning," she said. 40,000 years ago, we reached out our hands and begged for help. No one took them. Now we reach out our hands again. But this time, we are not begging. This time, we are offering. She extended her hand to Admiral Xyrathan. After a long moment, the Admiral took it. "Let us hope," Xyrathan said, "that this time is different." "It will be," Elena promised, "because this time we are different. And we will never go back to being what we were." The collective ships departed. The human ships returned to their impossible civilization. And across the galaxy, 12 species tried to process what had happened. The dead had risen, and they were stronger than ever before. 5 years passed. 5 years of slow, careful integration. 5 years of fear and wonder and gradual acceptance. The galaxy was changing, and everyone knew it. Human ambassadors walked the halls of the Supreme Council on Nexus Prime. Human traders visited markets on 100 worlds. Human ships moved freely through space that had once been close to them. And everywhere they went, they left behind gifts. Technologies that cured diseases the collective had suffered for millennia. Techniques that made farming more productive and energy more abundant. Knowledge that opened doors to discoveries beyond imagination. Not everyone was grateful. Some species resented the newcomers and their impossible achievements. There were protests and conflicts and diplomatic incidents. A few extremist groups even attempted attacks on human settlements, though those attacks never succeeded. The humans did not retaliate. They simply protected themselves and waited for the anger to burn itself out. Kira Voss had become the leading expert on human culture in the collective. She spent most of her time among them now, studying their civilization from the inside. They had welcomed her as a guest, given her access to their libraries and archives, answered her endless questions with patience and honesty. One day, Elena Marsh invited her to visit the human homeworld. Not Earth, which remained a barren memorial orbiting a dying sun, but a new world they had built from scratch. They called it Genesis. The ship that carried her there moved faster than anything the collective had ever built. Space itself seemed to bend around them as they traveled. Within hours, they had crossed distances that should have taken months. Genesis appeared on the view screen like a jewel against the darkness. It was beautiful in a way that took Kira's breath away. Continents and oceans, mountains and forests, all created by human hands. Artificial moons hung in the sky, providing light and regulating the weather. Cities gleamed along the coasts, connected by transportation networks that defied physics. They landed in the capital, a place called New Beginning. Elena was waiting for her at the spaceport, dressed in casual clothes that made her look almost normal. Almost human, in the old sense of the word. "Welcome to our world," Elena said. "What do you think?" "It is incredible," Kira admitted. "I have studied your species for my entire life. I thought I understood what you were capable of. I was wrong." Elena smiled and led her into the city. They walked through streets filled with humans of all kinds. Children ran and played, their laughter echoing off buildings made of materials that the collective could not identify. Old couples sat on benches, watching the stars through the transparent dome that covered the city center. Artists created works of beauty in public squares, while scientists discussed theories in outdoor cafes. Thought it looked peaceful. It looked happy. It looked like everything the collective had always claimed to want, but had never quite achieved. You wanted to know what 40,000 years of isolation did to us, Elena said. This is the answer. We had nothing but time and determination. We could have spent that time nursing our hatred, planning revenge against the galaxy that abandoned us. Some of us wanted to do exactly that, but you did not. No, we chose to build instead of destroy. We chose to create instead of hate. It was not easy. There were generations that struggled with bitterness, that wanted nothing more than to make the collective pay for what they had done to us. But eventually, we realized that revenge would only diminish us. We had survived. We had overcome. That was victory enough. They reached the park at the center of the city. A great tree stood at its heart, its branches spreading wide enough to shade an entire block. Elena sat on a bench beneath it and gestured for Kira to join her. "You are still afraid of us," Elena said. It was not a question that Kira hesitated before answering. "Yes, not because I think you will attack us. I have seen enough to know that is not your intention, but because of what you represent. You are proof that everything the collective believes about the universe is wrong. Explain." We believe that species rise and fall in predictable patterns, that evolution takes millions of years, that there are limits to what any civilization can achieve. You have proven all of those beliefs false. You took a dying species and transformed it into something beyond our comprehension. If you can do that, then anything is possible. And that is terrifying. Elena nodded slowly. I understand. We felt the same way once. When we first realized what we were becoming, it frightened us too. But fear fades with time. What remains is wonder. She looked up at the artificial sky, at the stars that were visible even through the dome. Do you know what really horrified the collective when we revealed ourselves? It was not our technology or our power. It was the simple fact that we came back at all. Dead species are supposed to stay dead. Failed civilizations are supposed to disappear. That is the natural order of things. We violated that order. We refused to accept our extinction. And that is why you are so terrifying to them. Yes, because if we can refuse to die, then so can others. Every quarantine planet, every abandoned civilization, every species that the galaxy has written off as extinct, they might all be out there somewhere, waiting to return. We are not just a threat to the collective's power. We are a threat to their entire understanding of reality. They sat in silence for a long moment. Around them, life continued. Humans went about their business, unaware of the conversation happening beneath the great tree. They had their own concerns, their own dreams, their own struggles. They were still people, despite everything they had become. I have one more question, Kira said finally. If I may, of course. Why did you really come back? You could have stayed hidden forever. You could have built your own empire in some distant corner of the galaxy and never bothered with the collective at all. Why reveal yourselves? Why take the risk? Elena was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost vulnerable. Because we are still human. After everything, despite everything, we are still human. And humans do not hide. Humans do not forget. Humans do not give up. We reach out. We connect. We build bridges instead of walls. It is our nature, for better or worse. She turned to face Kira, and for just a moment, the historian saw past the evolved exterior to the heart beneath. The galaxy told us to die, and we said no. That is the most human thing we could possibly do. And now we are telling the galaxy that we forgive them. Not because they deserve it. Not because they asked for it. but because holding on to hatred would make us less than what we have become. Kira thought about all the species she had studied in her career, the ones that had risen and fallen, the civilizations lost to time and entropy. None of them had come back. None of them had refused to stay dead until now. That is what really scares them, she realized. Not your ships or your technology. The fact that you forgave them. Because forgiveness requires strength they cannot imagine. Elena smiled, warm and genuine and utterly human. Perhaps. Or perhaps it simply requires hope. Hope that the future can be better than the past. Hope that old wounds can heal. Hope that enemies can become friends. She stood and extended her hand to Kira. Come, let me show you more of our world. Let me show you what hope can build. Kira took her hand and rose to her feet. Above them, the artificial suns burned bright, beacons visible across the galaxy. A reminder to every species that looked upon them, humanity had returned. Not as conquerors or destroyers, but as builders and creators. They had stared into the void of extinction and emerged stronger than ever. And now they were offering that strength to the galaxy that had abandoned them. It was not forgiveness that frightened the collective. Kira realized as they walked through the city of New Beginning. It was not power or technology or revenge, it was love. The terrible, unbreakable, irrational love that humans had for connection, for community, for life itself. A love that had survived 40,000 years of isolation. A love that refused to die no matter how hard the universe tried to kill it. That was what made humanity truly terrifying, and that was what might just save them all.